You're working for BlackRock and you're co-leading one of the fastest growing hedge funds in the world, which you grew from 3 billion to 10 billion in 18 months.
But I felt a little bit like a spy. What can I learn as quick as possible that I can then use to do my own sauce? He always used to tell me that sales is gold. And some people like red, some people like blue, some people like green. If you do a blue painting, find the people who like blue. But that's the vibe that I grew up in. Is like anything is possible. Is go for what you want and what you believe in. I want to sort of be, hopefully, a slightly smarter Forrest Gump.
Bastian, I want to start with a snapshot back when you're 25. So you're working for BlackRock and you're co-leading one of the fastest growing hedge funds in the world, which you grew from 3 billion to 10 billion in 18 months. So if you take me back to this moment, how did you feel?
Interesting question. I mean, I obviously I always dreamt about working at a hedge fund in New York. That's sort of I am Danish. I grew up in the south of France, and that was like the impossible goal when you want to be in finance, right? And so I thought, if I can ever reach that point, that would be amazing. So having the chance to work at BlackRock for a number of years, moving from London to Geneva, and then going to New York, it was just fantastic. I mean, I remember when I was in Geneva, I was ready to start my own thing. I always was. And the only thing that could keep me there, I thought, was like, okay, let me explore another country and see if I can make that dream happen. And so when I saw there was an opening at that particular M&A hedge fund in New York, I thought, well, I'll give the hedge fund manager a ring, try my shot. And he thought it made sense. They wanted to have somebody who knew Europe pretty well, who spoke European languages. So they flew me over there on a first class flight, which was I was 24 or something, 23 at the time. I was like, this is crazy. I saw the price of the ticket. I'm not gonna. I was like, this is more money than I have saved up. And they put me in a suite, the Cornelius suite, I think it was called, at the Plaza Hotel, and I was like totally jet lagged.
Kidding you.
Yeah. I was, I woke up there, like I literally slept 3 hours because I was so nervous. I knew it was gonna be a full day of interviews. I just overlooked all of Central Park, and I thought, this is amazing. I need to get this job. It'd be cool to live here. And so once, fast forwarding, I got the job. I moved there, got the visa in place and stuff. And so from day one, it was like, go. And yeah, it was a dream. I was very happy. I knew it was, work very hard, and that's sort of what I wanted. I think London was a hard-working culture. Geneva was a little bit more relaxed. I felt like if I was going to stay, it was to learn more and get challenged. And so I definitely had the chance to get challenged there. So yeah, I mean, I just started. I think we were like 11 people in total, including the assistants. Only 2 or 3 people on the fundraising team, product strategy team, which I was a part of. And so it's just a lot of responsibility in a fun environment. So yeah, and then it just continued taking off. And we did a good job of raising that money. And I think, I had one boss, very great guy called Mark McKenna. He used to be a nuclear engineer on a submarine in the Navy.
Wow.
And I think even the actual submarine had his own Wikipedia page. I think it was the USS Ohio or something. And he was like one of the top 3 lieutenants or generals there. And so it was very military style. I was the only non-European on the team. Non-US person on the team. And so, luckily I could excuse myself to have a few espresso breaks, and they were like, that's normal in Europe. Like, so I could get a few minutes here and there, the way I could just get some time off. But super grateful for the experience. It was a nice ride. And then after a while there, I thought, okay, now I'm not gonna want to try to move to Hong Kong or anywhere else. I've sort of seen the 3 main centers, London, Geneva, and New York, and I was ready to do my own thing.
Yeah, because at some point you also mentioned that you were looking at the people in your industry, like people that were in the industry for like 30, 40 years, and you had at some point the thought that their lives kind of suck. Like, why? What was it about?
I mean, listen, it's not that they saw. It's just people want different things, right? And I think they seemed very happy about where they were. I could just sense that it wasn't really something that was meant for me. I visited, some of the top executives at this particular firm, in their apartments in New York. I thought, you've worked so hard your whole life, and this is the result. And I just knew for that kind of money, you could have a pretty big house in the south of France, right? And that's what I would prefer because I grew up there. So it's just a different value system of like, what do you want? What's the point? Like what are you particularly interested in? And I think I'd rather make much less money and do
Mm.
something I'm passionate about. Ideally, both can go hand in hand, right? But that was the main thing.
We'll talk later about like how this ultimately led you to start your own
Mm,
venture fund.
mm,
But first, if we rewind a bit and look at the time before BlackRock and before you actually got into finance,
mm,
because you mentioned that you're actually a kid growing up in an artist family
mhm.
because your dad was painting abstract
Yeah,
art. So I'm wondering, like, how did this earliest context shape you and impact who you are today?
probably many more ways than I would like to admit. It's you know, it was a very unstructured way of growing up, right? It's just I'm sure there's a few other kids out there who have tried the same, but you know, it's not very usual,
Mm.
right? So again, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I have three siblings, and my father was this artist and designer, and you know, he used to be an executive at advertising agency. Did very well. Had a nice house in the north of Denmark when he was 30. Nice family. And then he actually saw a documentary on TV about this artist that lived in a castle in the south of France, and he saw him painting, and it took him 5 minutes to do this after all. He's like, I can do that, and I want to live in a castle. So literally the day after, sold the house, sold everything, bought like this post, what's it called, like mail carrier
Yeah.
van,
Okay.
painted it black, put a Danish flag and a French flag in it, and then we drove to France. And that was actually right before I was born. And so he was like, okay, now I'm gonna move to France. I want to live in a castle. I'm gonna be an artist, right? And so that's the vibe that I
Yeah.
grew up in. Is like anything is possible. Let's just go for what you want and what you believe in.
Do you have this quick decision-making process from your dad?
Maybe a little bit. And I think it's super. You know, it's a great point, but it's needed in VC, right? I
Yeah.
mean, things are moving so quickly, and sometimes you're just gonna be like, screw it, just like Richard Branson would
Yeah.
say, screw it, let's do it. And he's one of my idols, right? And it's like just gotta be willing to take a few chances and just say, "What the hell? Let's try." But yeah, so for sure, I mean, that was one aspect. And then again, like, you know, he was traveling a lot, and actually managed somehow to create a pretty good life for himself, which is rare in the art,
Mm.
you know, art world. There's very few artists who actually manage to, you know, live in a nice house, have
Yeah.
food, shelter, and like cars. So we're quite blessed in that sense. He was a great salesperson. He always used to tell me that sales is gold, and you know, some people like red, some people like blue, some people like green. You just gotta, if you do a blue painting, find the people who like blue, right? It's not it's not that hard. But so it was interesting, and he also taught me the power of like telling stories.
Okay.
I think that's super important, both when fundraising, but also when like trying to convince a founder that we're the right fit.
Yeah.
Most people have all these thoughts, and they know they're great in many ways. They just can't articulate it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I learned as well. So when I was like 10, 11, 12, I used to be an artist myself. Like that's what I grew up in. So I would have exhibitions.
Mm.
And when a lot of our, you know, my father's clients would come, the CEOs, doctors, lawyers, and you know, and sometimes they wouldn't want to pay like 10,000 euros for a painting of my father's. They could buy mine for 500, you know, and then they would have felt like, yeah, that
That's
was
cool.
good. I helped. So I always had sold out exhibitions, and I thought it was because I was great. Now I know it's because the price was lower, but
Yeah.
I remember I was 11, 12. I was talking to these CEOs, and I was like telling them the story of how I got the inspiration and stuff. And and I'm sure in their mind they were like, "This kid is crazy," but I really felt that, and
Yeah.
like I just told like I saw the sunrise, and that's why I painted it like this, and etc. And so like having a little bit of success early on, and that
Mhm.
really sort of gave me the confidence to try and continue exploring that path.
Yeah. And do you have any examples of when you were exposed to this like creative way of thinking, like from your dad, additionally to them, that you had your like sold out exhibitions at
Mm.
12 years old?
For sure. I mean, like there's a ton of stories. At one point, you know, he wanted to do his own furniture design collection, and so we went into this like furniture factory in the middle of nowhere in Denmark, and and there was 200 factory workers, and like he knew the CEO, and they're like,
Mm.
okay, we're only gonna focus on your design for the next 2 weeks or something. And he had to come up with a drawing, and he or like an idea, and he hadn't really done it. And so the day before, we were eating dinner, and he just took a napkin and started like drawing stuff. And then he took his picture and sent it to the guy. He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna. This is the sketch." And the guy was like, "This is not gonna work." And so we showed up, and after 2 weeks, there was a final product, right? And on the last day, to sort of celebrate this thing, it was called tiramisu design, and so a lot of the pillows looked like tiramisu
Yeah.
lady fingers, and so he had my whole family, me included, like make 100 tiramisu cakes at 4 a.m. in the morning to the whole factory as a thank you gift, and then he had flown in a native American from California, like it was called Chief Sonny Reyna. He got flown in, and he um, had to do like a prayer for all the people involved in the factory, and there was these 100 Danish factory workers like praying to the sun in the east and the west, like what the
Yeah.
hell is going on? I think in terms of creativity, I think that's interesting
Yeah.
because it's about when we host events as well for like our LPs or
Mm.
for startups. We don't like to do it as everyone is
Yeah.
doing it. We like to have something a little weird, and so I think that also makes us more memorable, makes us more fun.
Yeah.
It's more us. It's more authentic.
And do you think this earliest context also played a role on like why you quit at BlackRock and then pursued your own passion?
100%. I mean, I wanted to be an entrepreneur since I can remember.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, I think like actually joining BlackRock was, well, one, I wanted sort of the confirmation that I wasn't completely stupid. And I thought working at BlackRock would be, it would sort of give me
Yeah.
the confidence to say, okay, I'm not, I can do something.
Yeah.
But I felt a little bit like a spy, I was like, okay, this is the
Mm.
biggest investment company in the world, but in a good way, right? It's like, what can I learn from them? Like, what can I learn as quick as possible that I can then use to do my own, sauce,
Yeah.
essentially.
And why did you choose venture after that? Because you said like you had the entrepreneurial bug and that you could have there could have been many different things that you could have done. So why venture?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, again, I thought, do I want to launch a startup? Do I want to do
Yeah.
this? Actually, I thought I was going to do a startup. I've had many failed startups in the past while I was studying, or even while I was working at BlackRock. I was doing a lot of projects on the side, but there wasn't really one thing that sort of latched on and where I was like really, really inspired to
Yeah.
sort of work in it for a number of years. And I think for me specifically, it's I'm just a very curious natured person. And so, like, locking in on doing, like, an HR platform or whatever it
Yeah.
is, it's great that some people can do that. That's what we invest in.
Yeah.
But I think after a few years, I would have thought, nah, this is just, too boring. So
Yeah.
I think the great thing about venture is it combines sort of the skill set I use within finance, product strategy, fundraising,
Mm.
bringing the right team together with my natural curiosity, which is, I want to meet great potential investors
Yeah.
that have built great businesses. I want to meet on the founder side, some of the smartest people in the world that are
Mm.
building the next game changing idea. And like, I can specialize in different areas that I find super interesting and continue being sort of a student of the world, right?
Yeah.
Which, Larry Fink from BlackRock used to tell everyone at BlackRock every time, you need to continue to be students
Yeah.
of the markets. And it sounded a little cheesy when you're like 21. You're like,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, that's fine, grandpa. But I took that with me, and like
Yeah.
it's so true. Like I feel like a student of the world is is ultimately what also I believe will make you the best investor.
I agree. And so after you quit, you're going back to Europe, and you didn't really have a network here because you were mostly based in the US with BlackRock, and you didn't have a job and no real safety. But what you had is like you had an idea and a belief. So I'm curious
Mm.
if you could talk about this.
Yeah, again, I was sort of researching. So I quit BlackRock at the start of 2020. I wanted to take 6 to 12 months off,
Yeah.
just to avoid wearing a suit, funnily enough, and just think properly. And so I was traveling through South America, ended up in Rio, in Brazil, and then COVID hit. And I was like, "Oh, worst case, I'll just stay here." But
Yeah.
then, you saw the media, and at some point, you got afraid. I was like, "What's gonna happen?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought, "Okay, I'll take a plane back to Copenhagen, where I have a little bit of family, and then I'll figure it out from there." Luckily, I had applied as well for an MBA in the UK, and so I had some time to think. Started on the MBA, and then because of COVID again, didn't really make sense to be on campus.
Yeah.
So I sort of took it mainly online, and so I had a lot of time in Copenhagen. And then this idea got formed more and more, right? And I spent probably like 6 to 9 months just basically interviewing like
Mm.
VCs, startup founders, angel investors, to try and see like if there was anything I could add
Yeah.
to this world, right? Which I didn't really come from, but I was super
Yeah.
interested in.
Yeah.
And so I thought, there's funds popping up everywhere, left, right, and center. I didn't want to just be another VC firm. Like, yeah, I didn't even want to compete in that
Yeah.
field if there's nothing unique, right?
Yeah.
But luckily, I found a few things that I believe we could do better. And so then I called an old mentor of mine, a guy called Jacob, great guy. He runs a multifamily office
Mm.
down there, and manages the wealth of many hundreds of high net worth individuals. And I told him the idea, and he was, graceful enough to say, "Here, I'll give you a little bit of money, and then work on it for a while. And if you do well, I can introduce you to some people."
That's
So
cool.
that's how I sort of built that
Yeah.
network, and I knew it was definitely worth it to have him on board because otherwise it would have been an uphill battle.
I can imagine. No, but what like because I think in general, like as you already said, like the world doesn't really need another venture fund. So what did you learn in those conversations that you had with founders, VCs, and LPs that you now are able to bring to the table that sets you apart?
Mm. I mean, there was a ton of stuff. I think the 2 or 3 most important things was, 1, I talked with a lot of angel investors, and there were, many angels that are active, so usually part of this an angel network
Yeah.
group in their local countries or cities. And so I went to a lot of these different events, and my feeling when talking to these angels were twofold. One, the quality of the deal flow that they saw was usually subpar compared to what I was able to source even back
Yeah.
then.
Oh wow.
And I thought, there's all these people with money, with connections, with great knowledge, and they have to, choose between like crap, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I can give them better deal flow, that'd be a great thing. And at the same time, if I could include them in my angel network, then I could use their experience while doing my due diligence.
Yeah.
So sort of free consulting where we both help each other. That was one thing. The other thing was, so this was pre-chat GPT, right? So it
Mm.
seems like ages ago, but we were like, and there's something I took with me from BlackRock was how can we use technology to get 1 or 2% more information than the VC down the road,
Okay.
right? So that's more like the hedge fund
Mm.
way of viewing things, but it's hasn't really been applied that much to
Yeah.
VC, right? And ultimately, we're all competing for the best deals, and we help each other a lot. But there's also some sense of competition. So we wanted to have better information quicker, etc. So we built some natural language processing tools very early on that helped us with a few things, right? So one thing that I focused on was what some of the quant funds in BlackRock did. So they found that looking at subjectivity and sentiment scores
Mm.
were very predictive of future success. So sentiment is whether they're optimistic or pessimistic in the way of responding to your emails or your due diligence questionnaires, and you can find that through like positive and negative
Yeah.
words. And objectivity is obviously whether they sort of think and believe, or whether they know, and it's based on data and sources. And so we tried to build that and run these filters on the answers that we got. And it actually worked. Like it was also a form of personality test because we found that, the business school type of founders were usually very, very optimistic in the sentiment score
Yeah.
and very subjective. Um, and the PhD types were much more pessimistic and very objective. And so we also found what type of person they were through these analyses. And it was quite hard to fake because you're just
Yeah.
writing the answers after ChatGPT, now everyone's like answering our questions
Mhm.
with probably using these
Yeah.
tools. And so it's hard to like run or, use a robot to scan another robot.
Yeah.
So, but I think the main point of that is like we've always tried to figure out how we can get ahead of the curve.
Mm.
And so, using data and stuff like that has always been sort of part of our DNA
Yeah.
from day one.
So, so if someone would want to start a venture fund now, like what would be the things that you would recommend? Because it sounds like you started first with like establishing a network with the angel community that you built around, and then using technology as a leverage
Mhm.
where you saw an edge.
Yeah. And there was also the fact like, okay, we need some deal flow.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we like to, invest in startups.
Yeah.
But where will they come from? So we also like, it was just me in the beginning. I had this shared desk thing in Copenhagen, and coming from BlackRock, I thought, I'd open my laptop, there'd be a ton of emails as I do that, and there was nobody writing to me. I was like, oh yeah, true. Like nobody knows what I'm doing.
Yeah.
They don't even have my email. So I thought maybe if I write to somebody, they can reply, and then I'm gonna start having
Yeah.
emails. And that was the same for like deal sourcing. So literally, I just cold called incubators, accelerators,
Mm.
universities. And, after a few months, we were working with like 40, 50 incubators and stuff and starting to get deal flow. You had to charm your way in to see
Yeah.
if you could get the deal flow prior to the demo day, stuff like that. So that
Yeah.
was another aspect. But for me, like ultimately, all of these things are probably the most important, right? Like you need to have deal flow, you need to know
Yeah.
how to screen them, you need to have a good team,
Yeah.
you need to sort of understand the world and know what you're doing. But then the last piece, which many people struggle with, is the fundraising.
Yeah.
And so, luckily, I sort of came from that world a little bit, and it was super cool to, suddenly go out with our own pitch deck,
Yeah.
where it's at Blackwood, and be like, now I have, I'm pitching for something I'm doing myself. That's what I would recommend is like having a solid foundation. It could
Yeah.
be community, you just need to have an edge, better deal flow in a specific sector. You don't have to be broad or niche or whatever. You just need to have something that you actually feel you're very capable of doing.
Mm.
And then you need to be able to raise the capital, otherwise it's meaningless.
Yeah. And when you speak with founders or other VCs and you want to get into like oversubscribed deals, like what is the value proposition that you bring to the table?
Well, I mean, literally the first deal we did, this was a warehouse, the only warehouse deal we did before we actually done the first closing. And it was a little bit out of scope as well, but it's just I had known the founder for a number of years and I wanted to get in.
Yeah.
It was a music tech business, in Stockholm called Snafu, and Pub House was leading the round. It was a 2 million euro round, and they weren't really looking for sort of co-investors. But I called the founder, I said, "Hey, we want to get in." He's like, "Cool, I'll set you up with a call with Pierre Sundin, who's the CEO of Pub House." And for those who don't know, he used to be the CEO of Universal in the Nordics,
Oh.
and the guy who literally did the first deal with Spotify that enabled Spotify to
Mm.
become who they are today. Like he's a massive name, right? And so I was, first deal, a little, scared, and I had to argue for why Blackwood should be let
Yeah.
into this round. And I called him. He had 15 minutes. He was in a cab. I think he was in a Spotify documentary on Netflix as well. And he was like, "I just came out of the premiere." I focused on the fact that we had this big angel investor network. We were very well connected within, with different people that could help actually the start moving forward. And then we were a bunch of young guys
Yeah.
that literally like we're startup investing in startups, so we're like hungry and we want to help in every way we can if needed.
Yeah.
And so he sort of bought into that, and we took 20% of the round, so the first 400K
Wow.
check. Right, that was a cool deal, and it's done great.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes what I've found is, I knew we have the angel network, so a lot of potential clients, customers,
Yeah.
it will help open doors into different markets. I mean, we're just very passionate about what we do, quite knowledgeable. And again, we sort of tend to follow more than we lead.
Yeah.
But what I've found is even as a follower, when I'm on these boards or something, like I hear these sometimes the lead investor, and I feel like they should be able to do more, and I can't help myself.
Yeah.
And so we've had a lot of good feedback from the founders. So and then the final thing that I didn't really think would be a reason to get invited into rounds is actually our youth. So I think the average age at our company
Mm.
is probably like 26, 27. We're 6 people full time. And I think actually, when we speak with founders that are sort of in the younger age bracket, they see eye to eye with us. They're like, "Well,
Yeah.
you look like me. You're like me." And so, yeah, we'll take the big brand name
Yeah.
that we know. Yeah, we'll take these old people with experience, but we'll give a little slice to you because there's
Yeah.
something there, right? And usually they've been very happy about that. So that's something I didn't really expect. I didn't know how it was
Mm.
going to be seen, but it's been a huge advantage because they can feel our energy.
Yeah.
They can feel we're actually there. Like, yeah, I mean, we could use more sleep at the company, but that's another subject.
So let's talk about the fundraising process. You mentioned it. So because you also said you didn't really have a network in VC and also not with LPs. And so how do you get into a room with LPs?
Yeah. Um, Again, through this one connection
Yeah.
after a year or so, again, we were in the fortunate situation of being able to use a year and a half or so, just like literally writing on whiteboards and
Okay.
interviewing people. So I didn't want to launch a VC firm, as I mentioned, like
Yeah.
before, knowing that we could do something exceptional. And so I said, well, let me spend some time. I didn't know it was going to take a year and a half or 2 years. That was a little longer than
Yeah.
expected. But to really, really do our homework and like see if we can McDonaldize the process of investing. Like, how many startups can one person see per month realistically
Mm.
if we hyper like if it becomes super efficient? So like so we experimented like even on random cases, right? We
Yeah.
just send them out for free after our due diligence to the network just to see if people agreed that they were good cases
Okay.
for free, right? So we just experimented. We said, okay, let's spend 5 minutes here, 10 minutes on this, 20 minutes on this, um, and so yeah. So anyway, after a year of doing this, my mentor he said, well, it looks like you've actually worked a lot, so I can introduce you to 2 people, and they ended up being great people, very successful business people in the Nordics. That literally had a meeting with them both separately on the same day, and I was pitching a non-existent fund
Yeah.
without an accreditation, like just imagining like in the
Exactly.
future what it could be. And they both independently of each other said, "Yeah, we'll commit like it was a great amount
Wow.
to this non-existent fund once you have it up and running, and we want to be co-owners of your company because I think you're gonna go places."
And
And
what did the pitch look like?
oh, it was horrible
Uh,
compared compared to what we like. I came with like 4 ugly slides, that we had prepared. But I think they could feel the energy and the vision, and so basically getting them on board has been fantastic. So after 2 years, we got the accreditation. We were ready to finally take on the very serious job of like managing other people's money.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and obviously through having those commitments already from the GP itself, from
Yeah.
the owners,
Yeah.
sort of gave some credibility when we're talking to other people. And then from there, it's I mean, we've just been grinding again like a startup. I mean, and I feel like for us or for me and for everyone in the team, like there's no job that is sort of beneath us.
Yeah.
Like we will cold call
Cold
if
call, yeah.
we'll do everything needed to get to where we want to go.
Yeah.
Um, and so we've done a lot of things like we've sent thousands of emails. We've been to every angel investment thing. We've traveled everywhere over Europe. At one point, we even found the addresses of the holding companies of the 1,000 richest people in Denmark and sent them physical letters with a QR code. I think we got like 15 emails saying no thanks, but one invested, so it paid for the
Yeah.
letters. So we've really done a lot, and I think word of mouth spreads fast. And if there's one wealthy individual in Denmark who doesn't know who I am, that would surprise me. Either they're invested in the fund,
Yeah.
or they will be in the future.
And you mentioned that you are probably one of the youngest VC funds around. So how do the LPs react to this? Because you mentioned the founders, it's perceived very positively,
Mhm.
what I can imagine. But
Mhm.
I can also see that many LPs potentially could see it as a red flag. So
Yeah,
how would you react to that?
yeah, and listen, we're not for everyone.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Okay.
If they wanna invest in people that have more experience, great.
Yeah.
Those are the funds for that.
Yeah.
I think the reason why people invest with us is because of our energy, because of the fact that, even though we're quite young, every single person on our team have tried to launch a business
Mm.
or launched a business and sold it prior. Even if it's on the small scale,
Yeah.
we're all entrepreneurs, we're all like go-getters, doers, and then again, like we screen 500 plus startups a month. Like there's no other VC fund in Denmark that I know of that
Mm.
screens that many, right? So we're actually like proving that like we have this huge deal flow and we can select the winners and get in with other huge funds. So that creates some sort of like de-risking
Yeah.
in their mind. A lower hanging fruit is the fact that in Denmark, again, our LP base in Denmark is primarily Danish for Fund One.
Yeah.
We're expanding now, but is that there weren't that many funds around in Denmark that gave pan-European
Mhm.
exposure. So we've made 21 investments now in a little over 2 years.
Okay.
I think we're reaching for 32. So we'll be fully deployed in a year's time. So it's around 10 per year.
So you, as you mentioned, you raised the first fund, which is 25 million,
Mm,
and I think it's super impressive because especially you didn't have experience before
mm,
and you didn't have the network before. So
mm,
I'm wondering, like, what is if you would name like one thing that
mm,
actually allowed you to do this, like,
mm.
what would that be?
Probably persistence. So again, just like a founder, I think what we look for in a founder, I want us to have that same value. And for us, it's grit.
Yeah.
It's like this is gonna get tough. And I can't remember. Even like some of the people at my office, like they have pictures of me just laying on the floor, literally in front of them, being like, I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
I think one of the guys has like 20 pictures of me in different, different positions. So it's super tough, but you need to push through. And so I think when we got the accreditation, we raised the first $10 million in 3 to 4 months to do the first closing. And in those 3 months, I had 136 one-to-one meetings with high net worth individuals, and I closed 25 of them for 400K each on
Yeah.
average, right? And now we have like 65 LPs. The average is sort of the same.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of people, a lot of meetings, right? So 136 physical meetings in 3 months.
It's insane.
And to get those, you need to write to thousands.
It's a lot of
Uh,
coffee.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And even actually after the first close, I thought I'd take the LPs out for lunch and
Mm.
thank them. And so I was eating at the same restaurant. Literally, I booked it every day for like 40 days. And I was like eating the same bolognese every day. And like, I walked in, they were like, the bolognese? I was like, yeah, yeah. It was sort of just to get to know them better
Yeah.
and stuff. But I
Yeah.
think yeah, you got to cultivate it. It's like, you don't just take the money and say thanks.
Mm.
There's also like, can they help us
Yeah.
with more deal flow,
Mm.
with like scaling some startups? And also you got to remember like they might invest in fund too.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other business, right? But there's three pillars in VC. One is investing in great startups, fundraising and managing that, and then the admin, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of involved in a little bit in everything, but you got to be able to trust the people on either side of those things to be as hungry as a startup founder would, because you need grit in fundraising,
Yeah.
you need grit in finding the right
That's true.
teams, and traveling all the time, and you need grit in just doing the boring admin stuff
Yeah.
as well.
And you also created Blackwood Lab, which
Mhm.
I think is super interesting because you're writing papers with like Harvard and other universities.
Mm,
And one of the things that you looked into is the founder psychology.
mm.
And because it's pretty unusual for a VC, like, why did you set that up?
Yeah. Goes back to point number one. Can we do something better than anyone else?
Yeah.
And maybe it might be delusional, but if you don't believe that you can become better than anyone else, then why do it in the first
Yeah.
place? And I think you interviewed the founder of Zalando. I love that interview as well. I mean, you're a fantastic interviewer, by the way. And the thing where you asked about how was it being a fly on the wall from day one, I think if you'd been a fly on the wall in day one in our space,
Yeah.
it was the same thing. Like we're gonna be the best, the biggest, the best, the
Yeah.
baddest. And part of that is like, well, you gotta do crazy things or like
Mm.
go out, think outside the box. Angel network, tech. I'm not a tech guy. I can't
Yeah.
code. I might be able to now through Lovable, but we're gonna figure it out. And the last thing was, okay, we have all these great connections to fantastic universities around the world. There's all this research being done by the brightest minds, and usually it doesn't really get
Yeah.
noticed, right? There's some, only PhDs in a niche market that might read it. And we thought, why don't we dig up some of those things and see how we as investors can learn from that and become better investors? And we don't mind actually sharing that
Yeah.
research, right? And so we started in the beginning. We get better at doing more there, and I think we're gonna level up and try to do so. But we've written a few papers. One that I found particularly interesting was with a professor from HEC in Paris on the role of purpose, and purpose was always overused over the past
Yeah.
5 years. It's sort of died down now. But it was super interesting. Like, okay, grit is important. We know that, but purpose is equally important in a startup founder. Like, because they're gonna have to work on this for 10 plus years, right? But how do we measure that, and
Yeah.
and how big of an impact can it have?
You mentioned that, like, I think because it's two different things. Like, one is the research that happens, because from our own experience in academia, but it's a very different thing to actually implement it.
Mhm.
So, if you have this outcome, like, how do you implement it
Yeah.
into your
Mhm.
like operations of fund?
Yeah, but it's sort of like compliance training. That's how I see it. Like you have it once a year. From our CEO, you shouldn't accept money from this, da da da. We're like, cool, yep. And the more you get exposed to it, the more the people in our organization know what to look for.
Okay.
And so this is not like we're taking the research and doing like strict
Yeah.
implementation. We're just reiterating as often as possible, maybe once a quarter. Like, remember these things.
Mm.
That's something you need to think about. So for the paper we wrote with Dr. Thomas Graeber from Harvard, it was more like behavioral stuff. So, and one thing that he looked at was like information sharing. So, obviously, if we're a fall investor, we speak with the lead VC. If I just call and said, they're already committed to this new startup, and I say, oh, what do you think of the startup? They're not going to say it's shit, right? They're going to say that's great.
Yeah.
And so, if you're a sort of a naive VC, it's oh, great. Well, the VC liked it. Check, we can go, right? But like, you need to be, very careful in terms of how you interpret that information because when information is shared, I don't know the English term for it, but in French it's like téléphone arabe. It's like, you say one thing, then you say to the other, and
Yeah.
then at the end it's a totally different word. And that's the same with like information in terms of their past
Yeah.
experience for the founders
Yeah.
or whatever it is. So you need to just be aware of those biases to avoid falling those
Okay.
traps. And so I think it's more like I don't want to fall in the trap of like investing in somebody because they look like me or whatever. So we're
Yeah.
quite diverse in terms of who we've invested in, and I think that's just important to reiterate in the team through
Yeah.
research.
Okay.
That sort of backs it up.
So it's not like you build your systems around it. It's more that you raise awareness within the team so that everyone has the same knowledge on those fields that they actually.
So far, I
Yeah.
mean, we might reach a point where there can be some things
Mm.
where like this is good to implement in a more systematic way.
Yeah.
But so far, that's how we've approached it.
Yeah. And if we look back, because I think your earliest context plays also a role in this, is you see in investing like at the intersection of art and
Hmm.
science. How does this actually manifest itself in how you operate the fund?
Yeah, again, like it's I come from this art background,
Yeah.
and that's why I like the art and science piece, but it's super relevant, especially in VC.
Mm.
It's not like we're quant trading where it's
Yeah.
much more science based. So I think this is ultimately a people's game. So to reply on the science bit, again, we try to become better investors through research from top tier universities that we trust. We use data. Most of the people on our team have gone to great schools and
Mm.
know their way around like the basics of
Yeah.
math or whatever, right? So all that is covered on the science front. But on the art side, and again, we're early stage investors, as less numbers and
Yeah.
stuff. So it's more about a gut feeling. And so I think the art piece is the hardest
Mm.
and that's why I think I like the fact that we are a team that speaks several languages, that have lived in multiple countries,
Yeah.
and that have this cultural awareness. And so when we discuss cases, it's not we can actually relate and try to find the common denominator that we all can agree on.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the art aspect, which is hard to articulate, but I think it goes back to culture and a global understanding of the world we live in.
I think it's hard to articulate and even harder to actually screen for when you build your team.
Mm.
How do you do this?
Yeah, well, again, I've been quite lucky. I think we have a great team, and so actually, some of the LPs that we have saw the team that we had and said, "Well, you seem great at picking the team
Mm.
members. You might be great at picking the founders because they understood that thing."
Yeah.
And so I totally great point, right? If you have a GP and you think that the rest of the team sucks, you
Yeah.
might think maybe you're not that
Yeah,
great at
exactly.
people, right? So hopefully you have a great AI that can help you somehow. But I think that's part of it. And so yeah, it's our head of IR, Jonas, shout out to him. We were hiring. He was a very young guy still studying, and we had already picked a person to help me with fundraising.
Mm.
And then he just cold called me, and I really like his very salesy way. That's sort of what we needed in that
Yeah.
person. And then I had another conversation with him, and we had like a sort of a salary that we had in mind, and he asked for double. And at that point, I knew he's the guy we need because he needs to do the
Yeah.
same on the LP side,
Yeah.
right? So it depends on the role, but I think that's one example of how
Cool.
sort of we view things.
And talking about like different influences in your career, you also mentioned that you had some great mentors and influences throughout your path. Like, I'm wondering, like, what is like one of the biggest takeaways that you took from those people?
I've learned a lot from various different people. I think again, like my old boss in New York was very like rigorous and very systematic with his usage of time,
Mm.
being able to say no.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key thing I learned there. And then my mentor from Luxembourg that sort of helped me do this is just a very energetic guy. And I think, that I was like, oh, he's always so cool.
Yeah.
And now I think he's close to 60, but he's still like, he's always on. And I think that's super important. Like you need to show enthusiasm for
Yeah.
whatever it is you do, and otherwise don't do it, or you're in the wrong field. So whether it's just bringing that enthusiasm, like the rigor, like being able to know your shit as well.
Mm.
When building a fund, at some point I felt like I was a lawyer, which was killing me. I was reading all the LPA a
Yeah.
thousand times and double checking, and then you have to understand. So now today, the good thing about that is like I can literally, I guess, in most cases, answer most of the questions, whether they're technical about the
Mm.
fund or legal or anything. And I
Yeah.
think that gives a great confidence, and you know that you're on top of your stuff, so you can actually produce great results.
Yeah. Bastian, you told me, maybe you'll regret it now, but that when you were 16, you told people that you would want to manage Justin Bieber's money. So,
That's true.
when, now I'm wondering, like, when you look into the next 10 years, like, where would do you want to be? I mean, maybe it's still the same thing, but
But again, it's a great point. I think like that's also part of why I guess I and we at Blackwood wanted to build this. It's also part of it is we want to have fun.
yeah.
Going back to like I couldn't do a startup for like 12 years. That's just one thing.
Mm.
I'm just too curious, and I think it goes back to having fun. Like
Yeah.
again, once you grew up in this environment where you actually can make a great living by making a drawing, you know that everything is possible. And
Yeah.
so I just like having these weird dreams. And if I like a person, obviously I want to do business with them,
Yeah.
right? I want to get closer to them. I'm very deeply passionate about arts and
Yeah.
music, outside of just the day to day sort of finance stuff, and tech, right? But it's so I have these things, and I think
Mm.
it's an interesting thing. Like 20 years ago, you couldn't have a CEO of Goldman Sachs being a DJ, right? And now that's the case, right? There's all these things where people are allowed to have
Mm.
different interests,
Yeah.
and I just always thought that's why I think Richard Branson is an interesting example.
Yeah.
He's just very honest about who he is, and he can have different interests. And so for me as well, like I have no trouble saying that, like, yeah, I'd like to get involved. I'd like to have a bunch of different LPs at different sectors, so we can sort of cross pollinate and
Yeah.
help each other raise these companies to the next level, no matter what it is. You're seeing fintechs using Will Ferrell, as the spokesperson. Well, it'd be
Yeah.
great to have Will Ferrell or somebody like that in the LP base, so you just give him a call.
Yeah.
So like, it's just like making life interesting and like not taking things too seriously.
I think that's a good approach.
Uh,
So if you look back at your unusual path, because we kind of span from your early influences with your success at BlackRock and now building Blackwood, what is a like core principle or just a simple thought that helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I was talking at Cambridge University yesterday, and I was asked sort of a similar-ish question. I think if I had to mention one thing is sort of keep it simple, stupid. And it's just I've always been amazed, like, sort of the people that are saying something quite simple,
Mm.
but in a very complicated way. I feel it's a waste of time, and I get bored,
Yeah.
and it's just not efficient. And so I think that's the ultimate principle. Is like let's boil it down to the essence, and let's just talk
Yeah.
normal, and let's just get stuff done.
Mm.
Right? That's sort of my go-to mode, and I think
Yeah.
that's how we operate as a company. And that's sort of what I like in other founders as well. Like obviously, you can if you have to talk about technical jargon,
Yeah.
there's some complex words, but, like, in general, where's the business heading? What
Yeah.
can you do? It's quite you can articulate
Yeah.
that in a way that's manageable, and I think it also goes back to, like, keep it simple in terms of not overthinking things too much, because if you do that, you'll just be scared and you
Yeah.
won't take any action.
Exactly.
If I had done that, I wouldn't have quit to launch a VC firm with not very much experience, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm very happy I did so. Yeah, just don't be scared about just going out there and try to keep it simple.
Bastian, we have a closing tradition on this
Mhm.
podcast. I ask it all guests is like, if you could challenge our listeners to do one thing, like in the next week, that gets them a step closer to their goal, and this is like whether they're students,
Mm,
professionals,
mm,
founders, or
mm.
whatever it is, what would that be?
Yeah, so I've actually, written a little bit about this and thought about this a lot. To me, it's like find your why. What is the why? Like, why are you doing this? And to me, it's like curiosity, being challenged, having fun. But I've really dug deep in myself to try and figure those things out.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds stupid, but like I love the movie Forrest Gump.
Hmm.
I saw it as a kid. I've seen it 1,000 times now. The fact that this, young kid with not a seemingly not great future just
Yeah.
ended up being in all these random things, right? Fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I aspire to. And that was actually part of my why. Like, I want to sort of be hopefully a slightly smarter Forrest Gump. And so, I think if you can really sit down and like
Yeah.
spend an hour like thinking about the why, that will save you years of your life.
Yeah.
Because most people are just in tunnel vision, right? They do their job, and then I was speaking with a guy yesterday actually, who just worked in the medicine industry, and now he woke up at 73. He's like, actually, not he stopped working recently.
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, I've had all these ideas for years, but only now I have the time to really put them into action." And
Yeah.
he's been in that industry for 40 years, and he regretted that.
Hmm.
And, like, you can easily have the tunnel vision if you don't, like,
Yeah.
take a step back, think about what you really wanna do, why you wanna do it,
Yeah.
and then actually go after it.
And I think it's also a process. Like, it's not necessarily something you do once and you know it and you know what to do, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
rather like,
evolving.
yeah, exactly. It's evolving, and
Mm,
also it's just more like finding your path towards something,
yeah.
which is not like a finished process at
And
this
it's
point.
more exciting,
Yeah.
even if you fail. I
Yeah.
mean, you only live, 9 times if you're a cat, right?
Thank you so much, Bastian. This was so much fun.
Likewise.
And I think we saw you're a very unique individual. And like one thing that really stands out to me is like your positivity, and
Mm,
really that
mm,
you have this belief that you can make things happen. And
mm.
that's super inspiring to be around. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.